The United States has been the world's leading superpower for decades, but in recent years, some countries have emerged as a serious challenger. Is the US still at the top, or is there a new king? The question of whether the US is still at the top or if there is a new king is one of the most important geopolitical questions of our time. The answer will have a profound impact on the world order and the lives of billions of people. In this video, we will explore the question of whether the US is still at the top or if there is a new king. We will examine the factors that determine a superpower and compare the US and China on these factors. Stick around to find out. The US as a global superpower. If you look at the news each day, it might seem like the United States is not doing well because other powerful countries like China and Russia are becoming more assertive. But Michael Beckley, a professor who studies politics at Tufts University, disagrees with this idea. He thinks that the United States is still the world's most powerful country, and this will likely remain true for many years to come. In his recent book called Unrivaled, Why America Will Remain the World's Top Superpower, Beckley talks about the many strengths of the United States and the weaknesses of its rivals. However, he also says that while it's possible that the United States could have problems and lose its position as a top superpower, it's more likely that it will continue to do well. In terms of how the government works, the United States has some issues, but China's system has even more problems, he explained. The United States might not be a perfect democracy, but China is ruled by one person who can be in charge for their whole life. US dominance versus competing powers. During the Singapore summit, experts noted that while the United States maintains global dominance in finance and technology, there's an ongoing debate about its role as the world's preeminent power. China, as the world's second largest economy and a major player in global trade, is a significant part of this discussion. According to CNBC, mainland China was the primary trading partner for 61 countries in 2022, while the United States held that position for 30 countries. The experts also discussed China's growing economic influence, but agree that it hasn't yet assumed a primary role on the world stage. Factors maintaining US power. First, the United States is significantly ahead when we consider the most crucial aspects of national power. China is the only country that even comes close, and the US still has 3 times more wealth and 5 times greater military strength than China. Even if things take a turn for the worse for the United States, it would take many decades for China to catch up. Second, it's unlikely that things will take a downturn for the United States, especially in comparison to other major powers, because it has the best long-term potential for economic growth. Economists have demonstrated that a country's future economic growth depends on its geographic location, population, and political systems. The United States has an advantage in all 3 of these areas. From a geographical perspective, the United States naturally stands as an economic center and military stronghold. It's abundant in resources and boasts numerous economic conduits, such as navigable waterways and ports, surpassing the combined total of the rest of the world. Its only neighboring countries are Canada and Mexico. In contrast, China has depleted many of its resources and is encircled by 19 countries, a significant portion of which have adversarial or unstable relations. Furthermore, 10 of these nations assert territorial claims within China. In terms of demographics, the United States is unique as it combines significant size, a youthful population, and a high level of education. The US workforce ranks 3rd in size, 2nd in terms of youthfulness, highest in terms of educational attainment measured in years of schooling, and is the most productive among major powers. Additionally, it's the only significant workforce that will continue to grow throughout this century. China, conversely, is set to lose 200 million workers over the next 30 years while witnessing a surge of 300 million senior citizens. On average, Chinese workers generate 6 times less wealth per hour than their American counterparts. More than 2/3 of China's labor force lacks a high school education, and 1/3 of Chinese youth entering the workforce have an IQ below 90, primarily due to malnutrition, inadequate care, and pollution. Institutionally, the United States faces its shares of challenges, but China's system is in an even more precarious state. The United States is a flawed democracy, whereas China is governed by an oligarchy led by a dictator for life. Special interests may hinder US growth and contribute to corruption and inequality, but the Chinese Communist Party systematically sacrifices economic efficiency to maintain political control, ultimately fostering corruption and inequality. If you're enjoying it so far, hit the subscribe button. Now, let's continue. Challenges to the US dollar. China is not the only country looking to reduce reliance on the US dollar. During a state visit to Beijing in April, Brazilian President Lula reportedly expressed the need to decrease dependence on the US dollar in international trade. In 2022, trade between Brazil and China reached $150 billion, a 10% increase from the previous year, as per S&P Global Market Intelligence. During a recent visit to China, Malaysia's Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim proposed the creation of an Asian Monetary Fund to reduce reliance on the US dollar. Malaysia's Trade Minister also acknowledged concerns about Asia's dependence on the US dollar during an interview with CNBC on April 6. At the ASEAN Finance Ministers and Central Banks meeting in Indonesia in March, policymakers discussed the idea of reducing reliance on the US dollar, Japanese yen, and euro in favor of using local currencies for transactions. Additionally, the Ministry of External Affairs or MEA in India announced in early April that India and Malaysia had initiated trade in the Indian rupee to facilitate their economic activities. The Russia factor. While Russia poses threats to numerous US interests, including the endangerment of US allies, support for US adversaries like Iran and Syria, suppression of pro-democracy advocates, interference in elections, and recent territorial annexations near its borders, it is not positioned to emerge as a superpower rival akin to the Soviet Union. Russia's military budget is a mere fraction of America's, approximately one-tenth the size. Its economy is smaller than that of the US state of Texas, and its population is projected to decline significantly by around 30% over the next 3 decades. Russia lacks substantial allies and contends with NATO, recognized as the most formidable alliance in history along its borders, while the United States must remain vigilant about Russia's troubling actions, such as election interference and paramilitary incursions in the Baltics. It can address these concerns without necessitating a return to a Cold War-era confrontation. China and Russia's shared interests. Russia and China are unlikely to form a true alliance due to their extensive border, competition for influence in Eurasia, and arms sales to each other's adversaries. Nevertheless, their joint actions on certain issues are detrimental to US interests. Despite the gradual decline in its dominance, the US dollar is expected to remain unchallenged in the near future due to the absence of viable alternatives. The euro, considered an imperfect fiscal and monetary union, faces challenges, and the Japanese yen, another reserve currency, grapples with structural issues, including high debt levels, as noted in a CNBC interview with Shihab. As for the Chinese yuan, Shihab highlighted its limitations, such as constituting only about 2.5% of total reserves and China's maintenance of current account restrictions. This implies that it will take a considerable amount of time for any single currency to replace the dollar's position. US-China rivalry and global alliances. China has also consistently stated that it has no intention of supplanting the United States or exporting its ideology globally, as affirmed by Yan Shuetong, the Dean of the Institute of International Relations at Tsinghua University. Nevertheless, the rivalry between the US and China might compel other nations to make choices. Yan observed that an increasing number of countries appear to align with China on economic matters while relying on the US for security. Notable examples of such countries include Singapore, Japan, Germany, and France. Nigari Woods, the dean of the University of Oxford's Blavatnik School of Government, concurred with the idea that countries may need to engage in selective cooperation with either the US or China. Opportunities amidst US-China competition. The competition between the United States and China could potentially serve as an avenue for smaller nations to advocate for alterations with international organizations like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, as suggested by Woods, who holds a professorship in global economic governance. Woods highlighted the historical trend of international institutions evolving and becoming more receptive to the perspectives of their member nations. In essence, for countries outside the US and China, especially smaller ones, the intensifying rivalry between these superpowers within these institutions does not necessarily signify negative outcomes. Instead, it presents an opportunity for other nations to leverage the influence of these major players and push for the changes they have been seeking within these organizations. In conclusion, the question of whether the US is still at the top or if there is a new king is a complex one with no easy answer. The US and China are both powerful countries with their own strengths and weaknesses. The US has a long history as a global leader, a strong economy, and a powerful military. However, the US is also facing a number of challenges, including political polarization, economic inequality, and a decline in trust in institutions. China is a rapidly rising power with a strong economy, a growing military, and a sophisticated technological sector. However, China also faces a number of challenges, including an aging population, environmental problems, and a lack of political transparency. The rivalry between the US and China is shaping the global order in profound ways. It is important to understand the factors that are driving this rivalry and the potential consequences for the world. If you like this video, click the next one shown on the screen. I'm sure you'll like it. Thanks for watching.